what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and here we are with another 8 times speed 2-hour recording session that comes out late because I was at a Boston concert and it was totally worth it. And now I have a lot of work to do, but this took priority because this had to be out yesterday. Whoops. And a lot of the work that has to be done here actually has to be ready for an episode of the Iron Horseman Chronicles in a couple of weeks. So I may be doing a lot of work off camera, or maybe even on camera, and saving it for future episodes, but we'll see. It's not, of course, too hard to just record while you work, although it prevents me from taking a lot of random sporadic breaks, which is something I do very well. Anyway, today is quite a simple and complicated day, because what we have to do is build the Gorge. And we do get a significant portion of the way through this. Now, I am very glad for your sake that this is in 8 times speed, because I spend a lot of time tinkering with the edge of the Gorge here. And the problem is, I'm going to have to do this all the way down the Gorge to make it look correct. Because if I don't do that, what happens is you just get very repetitive sort of stuff, and I've found ways to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more interesting quickly, but the thing I'm still going to want to do is go over every section with with basically what amounts to the fine adjustment tool, and sort of customize the appearance of every section of wall to my liking. And there's not necessarily a problem with that so much as it takes a lot of time. Oops, I puffed the mic a little bit. Sorry about that. And in the meantime, I take a break and do some other random stuff, like I just work on the general terrain around, and at one point I realized that I never double-tracked a very large section from the dam southward, so I go ahead and do that. And here's me building the Gorge wall. Of course, we're going to cut into this quite significantly in a few places, but this is basically just, it's the groundwork. It is the baseline. So here we start copy-pasting again, and I fill in this whole section. Doesn't take too long, if I recall correctly. Even for me, at, 1/8 of the speed of what's currently happening, it didn't take too long. And honestly, the copy-paste flattening is something I sort of enjoy. It's not, it's not something that is particularly creative or interesting. It's just the kind of thing where it's more or less mindless, and it's kind of oddly satisfying when you're just plumping down large rectangular sections of ground for future use. I used the wrong terrain track here, and for that I apologize. And there as well. And that's a long one. And I put that down because I thought I was going to do some area with the terrain tracks as the plane tool, but I didn't get to do that. So, oh, there we go. I switched to the correct terrain track for that. And I think I ended up going over that section with a baseline later as well, although I'm not sure. I can't quite remember. Is this where I do the waterfall? Because this was an interesting point. So I got this 50-meter waterfall a little while back, and meanwhile in the background I'm listening to the Rooster Teeth guys talk about the new Rainbow Six game. But I'm trying to get this all adjusted so that it sort of makes sense and it looks good. And of course I don't quite do that, but I get in the vicinity of that. So I put that there. I have to readjust a lot of the stuff again. I'm sure every time I come down here and see something that's a little bit off, I'm going to be readjusting these waterfalls. But for now we have this 2-tiered waterfall, and it ends up looking pretty good. Not too terrible, and I get the water right up to it after a little bit of trial and error. And then realize it's running into the wall there, kind of shift it over a little bit, but I don't do too much with it after that. Game locks up on me here because I click on the wrong thing. I have to exit out and then forget what I was doing. What I meant to do right there was to change the wood track to the CHN track, which is what I'm about to do. Because the wood track is easier to work with because it's lower poly, and that means there's no performance drop when you're moving around a piece of one-track wood US, whereas if you're moving a piece of CHN wood 02 or whatever that thing is, the game doesn't like it at all. So, and here's me using this technique to sort of get cliffs and ridges in the cliffs, I guess. And I end up sort of avoiding a lot of that with my tweaking, but it does make things easier in the long run. It's the sort of thing where it'll shave you off some time in the long run for each little section. When you're doing a lot, it'll save you a lot of time, in the end. A lot of little things add up to something big. I decided to throw this train down there, which is, of course, the Broadway Limited, because I thought it looked good, and then I realized when I was moving the train would flash in and out of existence, and that was causing lag, so I went and deleted the train. But it looked good up there for the amount of time that we had it up there, and that's me sort of prototyping for a future scene, and this just didn't want to agree with me. I've got to put that tunnel in place, although I'm not sure what kind of tunnel I want to use. Most of the tunnels in trains suck. Also, Jader. Couple of things. First is, I have some good news, and that's good with an asterisk. Weibold can't get this map to work because he runs a older version of trains. So, guess what? Yeah, I know. I'm gonna finish the Gorge, I think. And then you can have some fun, I'm sure. Because that's just what you love to do. You like to build mountains, right? So I went to double track this, and realized that I hadn't sorted out the wonkiness yet. So that's my next thing. And I'm coming along here, and I'm doing it one spline point at a time, very carefully, trying to make sure everything sort of makes sense with the way it looks. And, game locked up again. And straightening out the sections in the middle of the S-curves, because that's kind of what makes sense. And sort of making sure the turns aren't odd. And then I come across this part. And what I'm about to show you exemplifies the reason why I don't like to use the gradient tool. It just would not cooperate. I tried again and again, it would not cooperate. So I just said, okay, F it, I'm doing this manually. And I set out to be as precise as I could with the just height adjustment of spline point tool. And so you're going to see me go along here very carefully and adjust everything to get as close to 1.5% without going over, just like Price is Right. And if I go over, that's not really a huge problem, but I'd rather not do it, because what happens is I can leave a little bit of rubber room, basically. I can leave a little bit of wiggle room. It doesn't matter too much to me if it turns out to be a little bit more than 1.5% if I was trying to get 1.5% overall. And what I mean to say is, when you adjust a spline point, the sections immediately adjacent to it will change, but so will the sections immediately adjacent to them. And that becomes a problem with a lot of these adjustments. It caused me to it caused me to spend a lot of time going back and redoing spline points that I had already done to make sure that they still had their consistency. And now the reason I was talking about wiggle room is because right then, when I was adjusting the curves, what I'm obviously doing there is adjusting the spline points, and that will directly influence the gradient of the sections that the spline points are attached to. I mean, that's kind of a duh thing, but it's true. And so now we're double tracking this, of course, trying to line up those spline points with their neighboring ones and bring this all the way down into Johnstown. And From there, we go back and we set up the spline point elevations, and we set up the, what do you call it? We re-straighten the trackage, that's neighboring straight trackage, and then we go back to doing some terrain work, if I recall correctly. Of course, it takes us a little while to get over there because we have a lot of mainline to do, and I am sorry, Jader, but yeah. Actually, this area may or may not be kind of flat, because the track here is fairly straight, so that's kind of a cue that nothing drastic is happening near it. I mean, I'm sure most of us here understand that whereas highways are laid as curves with interconnecting straights, which is, I can explain why they do that in a second, railroads are laid as straights with curves connecting them. And those two might sound like the same thing, but they're not. And what it contributes to is you have a higher percentage of turns on highways and a higher percentage of straights on railroad tracks. The reason they do straights on railroad tracks is because the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and therefore straight lines are most efficient. And a lot of the time, when you're building a railroad which doesn't really like to ascend or descend, a straight line is kind of your go-to, and you just sort of build embankments or cuts to fit it. And if you need to turn, you do. Now, highways are built the other way around, and the reason they're built the other way around is because they don't want drivers to get bored. They build highways that sort of, not that they weave all over the place, but they're not designed as dead straight lines unless you go out west where there's really no reason to make them turn at all. And I'm sure Wybold and Achilles can vouch for this, and or anyone here who's ever driven, in the Great Plains, or leading up to the Rockies, when there aren't mountains yet. Nebraska, parts of Utah, even parts of Colorado and New Mexico and stuff, they're just dead flat, so the highways are dead straight because you honestly can't find a good excuse to make them turn. And while, it's asked that, of course, highways aren't dead straight because of, people getting bored and slacking off of the wheel, which you don't want happening, obviously. TJ just logged into Gary's mod at 3:30 in the morning. Wow. And I thought I was bass-ackwards. What was he doing beforehand? Alright, but again, more of this flattening stuff, and again, this is kind of the groundwork. This is partially to kill time, and it's also partially to make Jader's life easier, which is something I would like to do, because the easier it is for him to do this, the quicker it'll get done, and the less stress we have to put on Jader, and then maybe in the spare time that he will have due to me giving him some groundwork, he will be able to go and find a life. Or maybe not, that's up to him. But thank you, Jader, for the great work you do, and for being very speedy and not having anything else to do. I'm sorry, I couldn't keep a straight face. Okay. So, again, with the oddly satisfying laying boxes everywhere, it kind of reminds me of Minecraft, don't you think? Actually, it doesn't really remind me of Minecraft. But here we go, flattening all this section out, and then I think I ran out of things to flatten. I came in here to just check on that town again. Ooh, ATLS crossings, oh my god. I have no idea how they work. And I keep just going back to look at the gorge and sort of going, this place looks nice. Because even though the terrain is not fleshed out and the ground is gray, it is much better looking than it was when I started this video, that's for certain. And I screwed up immediately there, so I had to go back and do that again. And here's me once again flattening some other sections, and the stuff near the gorge is also going to make my life easier. Wybold pointed out something which, gives me a good basis on how I'm going to build this, and it's the fact that we have some high flatlands and then the rivers sort of carving into them, instead of them running through channels and mountains a lot of the time. So, that could be interesting, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week. Shaman out.
Bye.